Hi everybody, welcome back to Soundwell Guitar. My name is Brandon, and today we're going to be discussing a rhythmic pattern that can be applied to all the previous chords we've learned. So let's get started. On our previous lessons, we've learned several basic chords. If you haven't seen those videos or you're unfamiliar with these chords, I encourage you to go back and watch some of those lessons to catch up and learn some of these chords. We're going to start today by taking the C chord that we learned a couple lessons back. And what we're going to do that's going to be a little bit more interesting than just strumming it with downstrokes. So that was a really good pattern to do at first, just to get started. We're going to do something just a little bit more interesting that requires a little more finesse with the pick. We're going to first pluck the lowest note on the chord like this. Now what we're going to do is keep our 4/4 count. Again, that's a really common time signature. It's going to be used again. We're going to do that plucking of the lowest note of the chord on beat 1, and then we're going to strum on beats 2, 3, and 4, creating this rhythmic pattern. So what the next step would be when doing this pattern is to try to do it with the progression itself. In this case, if we started with C, F would follow, and G7 would be the third chord, and then ultimately try to transition from the G7 back to the C. So before I go and play that whole progression with that rhythm, I'll just show you. With the F chord, we're going to want to pluck that note. That's the lowest note for that one. We go to the G7, and now it's that one. We put all that together, and the 4/4 count should sound like this. So that's a pretty interesting rhythm to do. Probably sounds a little bit like country music. That kind of thing. Very, very popular in like country and bluegrass. But it's a very valuable lesson even if you're not trying to sound like that, because now you're learning to pluck with a little bit more precision, but you're also learning something very important about your chords, and that is that they have a root structure to them. When we pluck that low note, that is what is known as a root note of a chord, or a tonic is another name you might run into. I like the root one though because it gives us a visual like a tree, and a tree has a root structure, and we can all appreciate how important that root structure is, and all the rest is just built off of that root or foundation. And chords are the same way. If you listen to it, you can hear that that note that we're plucking at the bottom is probably the most important note, I guess would be one way to put it. It's like the star note of your chord. Because that note carries the very essence of the chord, it's important to note that the chord has been named after that note. What I'm trying to say is, when we pluck that note of the C chord, that note is named C. C note, C chord. Let's also note that the chord is C major, but the note by itself is simply C. It's not a C minor, not C major. Notes by themselves can't be major or minor. But nonetheless, when we do this exercise, we not only learn an interesting rhythm, we can start to make a mental note of the names of these notes on the guitar. So I've said it several times already in this lesson, this note is C. When we go to the F chord, that note is F. We go to the G7. The low note on that one is named G. Now we're learning notes. Now we know 3 notes on the neck of the guitar: the C, the F, and the G. We can move on now to the minor counterpart here, the A minor progression. This one is a little different than the others because the lowest note on the chord is the open fifth string. Now that can also count as a root as well. You don't have to be fretting it for it to be a root. It's just qualified as that because it is the lowest note in the chord. Now I don't want to get super crazy technical, but some of you theory guys out there might be shaking your heads and saying the root note isn't always the lowest note of the chord, and you're right. But for now, it is. That's going to be our system. So far, all the chords that I've taught in these lessons, the lowest note is your root. And so it's safe to call that note the same name as the chord. So again, here we are back to our A minor chord. And the open fifth string's name is A. We go to the D, same thing. Our open fourth string is the root of that chord, and its name is D. We go to our E7. Open sixth string, and then E7, the name of that note is E. And this one, when we apply that rhythm, we'll do, let's do a 3/4 one this time. Again, sounds kind of cool, can really spice up your playing a little bit, and at the same time, you're making a mental note of where those notes are. Okay, so now we know C, F, now we know A, D, and E. Okay, we can move on to the next progression, G major. We're not going to learn any new notes there because it's going to be G, C, and D. We've already just established those. Even though like D7 or G major, they're slightly different chords, the root is the same. G7, root's a G, G major, root's a G. And then same with D minor, root's a D, D7, root's still a D. So you can really hear how that root, although very important to the chord, does not establish its major or minor tonality. It's the chords that are stacked on, or the notes that are stacked. It's the notes that are stacked on top of it. But here's what the rhythm would sound like with the G major progression. Okay, then we'll move on to the next progression, which would be E minor. We've got our E minor, our A minor, and then B7. Now we're learning a new note on the neck of the guitar. B. And that progression would sound like this. Okay, so I hope that this lesson's been helpful and that you'll practice these patterns. It really can be a very musically rewarding strumming pattern to do, and it'll make you a much more knowledgeable player. If you honestly want to say that you know this instrument, then you definitely want to know the names of these notes on the neck. Also, just simply knowing the names of the tonics for your chord. Again, they're going to be the same name as the chord. G major has a G in the bass, G minor has a G in the bass. But it's good to know these things to help keep everything straight. We'll see you next time.